Well, good day, fine people, and welcome to the Large Impact podcast series, where we share and interview people who make a large impact in their daily lives. So today, super excited to have Mr. John Sage with us, and he's amazing. So he's an industry leader in the large and growing accessible travel market. And according to the World Health Organization, people with disabilities comprise 15% of the global population. That's incredible. And they are 20 to 25% of the population in developed countries and source markets. And as baby boomers age, the population of people with disabilities grow because their bodies start to fall apart. And then we have mobility issues and, replacing joints and things like that. I'm only experiencing that with my parents and my in-laws. But John, you're like amazing because it says here you started in 2009 with your Sage Traveling Company, which is quite impressive. Okay, so was that like straight out of college? Like how did how did you
No,
get there?
no, I actually to get to that point, I was an engineer. I graduated college with a petroleum engineering degree, and so I was working as an engineer in my 20s, and my hobby was European travel. And so and I enjoyed engineering trips basically. And in order to plan those trips, it would take a enormous amount of time to try to find accessibility information on hotels, attractions, routes, trains, plan everything. Um, and so I was doing that. I was doing that. I was having a lot of fun doing that. And I organized a trip, and there was for some friends, just a mix of different friends, and there were seven of us that did a trip, and they had a great time. And they said, "Oh, you should write a book. You should be the disabled Rick Steves." And I said, "Well, I'm not much of a writer, but I'll start a website and see how that goes." And so that sort of was the impetus to get into to accessible travel. But it changed a lot from there. Initially, it was sort of I was going to write some reviews and some advice and maybe make a little bit of money through advertising. And I didn't realize that you need to have a lot of visitors to make any real money through advertising. And this was more of a niche market. So it ended up evolving that after about a year to plan trips for people with disabilities. Based on my firsthand knowledge, just I would go to a place and I say, now that I've been here, I would have done it a little bit differently. But now that I've been here, I know how to do it for somebody else.
Mhm.
And so, started doing that. And so some of my vacations became a little more work oriented, where I'd go to
Mhm.
Rome and visit 25 hotels, which is not exactly vacation,
Right, it's like
but
going to a convention. You're seeing stuff as you're driving by and trying to get.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, that's how it started. Was do the I took a different approach. It was do the research first and then start planning the trips there, which is different than a lot of the travel agents that sort of get the clients first and then they figure out how to plan it. I sort of did the destination first.
And we kind of, similar, with Champion Autism Network and the Autism Travel Club, it's similar, right? You need the boots on the ground. And that's one thing I thought, once COVID was over and we put all our modules online, I thought that I could administrate, grow this organization and other communities from here, from Surfside Beach, South Carolina. And you have to, as you know, you're traveling the world seeing you need the boots on the ground. So we're happy to have our ambassador program, but kind of similar to what you're saying. However, when you said this is where it started, that's where your business started. But how did you get, before we started recording, you mentioned that you had a spinal cord injury. So that's how you wound up
Yeah,
in a wheelchair.
sure. Yeah, so yeah. I was it was before my last semester in college. Had a snow skiing accident and hit a tree and sustained a T4 spinal cord injury. With some help, was able to go back and finish my last semester and graduate on time. And so that was took a lot of help because that was difficult time. But and then started working as an engineer in September. So it was January was my injury, and then started working full time in September, and so was making enough money to travel, and so that was my hobby.
So where was one of your hobbies prior to that travel too? Like you went to Europe um prior to
I
finishing college or?
I'd been to Europe once before, but always enjoyed travel and new experiences, and so it was just once I got in my 20s and had the money to pay for European travel or travel to national parks in the U.S. Spend or weekend trips to Chicago or Boston or wherever. Just really enjoy travel. Just enjoy the experiences. And European travel was really my favorite. Is the art, the architecture, the cuisine, the languages, the culture, the food. Did I say
It
the
is
food?
crazy
And
fun over there,
yeah,
isn't it?
yeah.
Do you have a favorite I guess European destination?
But yeah, my favorite. So in order to answer that question, I sort of have sort of three sub questions: is where would I like to go once? Where would I like to go back to? And where could I see myself living? And
Oh wow,
so
that's good. I like
so
that.
so so those three put if I ask those three questions, I put Florence at the top of the list.
Oh, okay. That's
Florence yeah, it's a livable city. There's not a whole lot of automotive traffic in the city center, so it's pretty easy to get around. And there's just a huge amount of history and art and architecture and food. And so I actually, the summer before COVID, spent 4 weeks in an apartment in Florence.
that's epic. That must have just been amazing,
It was
just
amazing. It
be
was
a
amazing
local
because,
and
right. And so I had already been to Florence at least three times, maybe four times. And so, but there was a lot that I hadn't seen because most of my visits were just a day or 2 days. And so got to visit all sorts of museums and churches that I'd never been to before. Saw there was a fresco that was in it was in a convent and was forgotten about for 300 years because no outsiders were allowed into the convent. And so ultimately in the 1900s, they discovered, oh, there's this fresco by this masterpiece that nobody's seen in 300 years. And so to be able to go into that, most international tourists, that's not on their radar. They're going to
right. They
see
don't
the
even know about it.
yeah, yeah.
Right.
And so there was things like that. And then also to be able to do day trips by train to Parma and Bologna and other nearby places. It was a great home base to explore the whole Tuscan region.
Yes, I've been to Italy. Look, granted, it was like a lifetime ago, a million years ago, and my husband just really wants to go there, so we hope to get there
Mhm.
definitely at some point. So how often are you home, or because because I'm like reading that you got visiting 140 countries, and you're doing all this stuff, and you're just talking about a weekend jaunt to Chicago, and like it.
Yeah, yeah. It's well, it's less now. I mean, the first business was planning trips for people with disabilities going to Europe. It was really the focus, and we do it in a lot more locations outside of Europe now. But the first one was based on that firsthand research, and so I was doing a lot of travel. I think the most that I ever did was I was gone from home 2.5 months out of 12 months.
Oh, that's not bad.
That
I
was
mean, like, in talking to you, it just
yeah.
sounds like you're here, there, and everywhere.
Yeah, yeah. So that was I was taking a lot of cruises to. We were launching the second business, which does a variety of things. We sell to travel agents, but the big thing that we do is we provide accessible shore excursions to the cruise lines. So I've
And
been
that's
to
accessible travel solutions, correct?
accessible travel solutions. Yeah. So that's been a big success for us. We're now working with 19 cruise lines, providing them accessible shore excursions. And so I did a lot of travel to figure out these ports and what a great sort of the ideal itinerary for a 1 day visit with a disability into the port. And so that's the most that I travel was really sort of getting off the ground is going on a lot of cruises.
Bummer. Telling you,
Yeah,
somebody's got to
I
take
know it
one
was
for the
tough.
team, I tell
It
you.
was tough.
So when you talk about accessible travel, it's your more mobility, like what the services that you offer are for mobility, generally speaking, or wheelchair users, would you say?
Yeah, it's mobility. So it's wheelchair mobility scooters, a lot of slow walkers.
Mhm.
In fact, that's something that we discovered specifically on the cruise lines. We have a bunch of data that we can collect, and some of the cruise lines have had concerns. They say, "Oh, well, what if we have too many wheelchair users for the van, and we don't have enough space?" And what we've discovered is, no, there's so many slow walkers or people that just don't want the fast pace. They don't want to walk up and down motor coach steps multiple times during a tour. So our vehicles fill up with slow walkers before they fill up with wheelchair users. So we do all types of mobility on the first two companies, which are essentially tour operator companies. And then the third business, we're doing other disabilities as well.
So yes, because that is called
Sage Inclusion.
Sage Inclusion. I'm sorry, I'm like looking at the notes and the
That's okay.
highlighted stuff, so I'm really sorry about that. And it was really fun to tune into the World Travel and Tourism Council that you're on for the federal government. And to see you and your handsome face at that long conference table in DC. I was,
Yeah.
how was that? Like, tell me, what it was like to be there, or like, your interactions with the World Travel and Tourism Council.
Well, okay. So the World Travel and Tourism Council is. I was in Rwanda for that earlier this year. That's a collection of private sector uh, representatives, a lot of executives from different private sector companies. That's been great, and it was actually sort of through that I made the connections to get invited to join to apply for what's the U.S. Travel and Tourism Advisory Board, and that's what I was in DC for. And so the U.S. Travel and Tourism Advisory Board is a 32-person board. It's a mix of kind of executives from some of the major companies. Airbnb, MGM Resorts, Carnival Cruise Lines are some of the individuals that are on it now, as well as specialists that really focus on sustainability or diversity travel. This is the first year that they've had accessible travel experts on that board. They recognized a year or two ago that they really needed to be a focus area. So I was really excited to be able to join that
Sure.
and lend my expertise. And so they asked me to apply, and I applied. I got on, and then I was appointed to be chairman of the subcommittee on accessibility. And over the course of a few months, we had quite a few meetings based on a charge that the U.S. Secretary of Commerce gave us of what she wanted us to accomplish. And we ultimately came up with recommendations for her, and I've sent those to her, and those are being analyzed right now to see what we can do. But it's been great just to have that voice, to get into these messages into the federal government, because the federal government is not just legislative. A lot of people think accessibility is just about legal compliance and about laws, when it's not. It's not. It's far more than that. But also the purchasing power of the U.S. government can really promote progress in accessible travel. So we're trying to leverage that as best we can.
So what does that mean, what you just said? Leveraging money and, like, what would
So
you want the federal government to do?
yeah, so the example that we used is several years ago. I don't remember exactly, maybe 10 years ago, maybe more. The US government passed a rule. It was basically a procurement rule that said, hey, the US government is only going to use software that can be used by disabled federal employees, specifically mainly blind people. We want to only use software that is written in a way that screen readers can use it. And what that did, even though it was just a procurement rule for the US government, it wasn't a law for the software industry or anything like that. But because it was a procurement rule, it was the purchasing power of the US government prompted this huge growth in digital accessibility. It really jump started and accelerated a whole industry. And so what our committee was thinking is, hey, why can't we do the same thing for accessible travel? It is use the federal government's purchasing power to say, hey, if we can get them, and this is not an easy thing. The U.S. government's a big organization. There's a lot of bureaucracy and everything. But if we can ultimately get it to where the U.S. government only works with travel suppliers and hotels and transportation companies and everything that meet a minimum accessibility standard, well, that will really just promote all the businesses to do a better job of accessibility.
Right. So, I would imagine that there's going to be, you've probably heard some pushback maybe on what you're talking about, or like, what's the feedback been? Um, we all know that we're cheering these efforts on, but there's
Mhm.
there's always that segment that are like, I guess, the haters. Like, have you gotten any like pushback from haters or heard anything?
And
Um,
we
money?
haven't gotten any official feedback yet, so I'm not sure how that's going to go. The recommendations went to the Secretary of Commerce. She will have to communicate. It's actually a different organization called the General Services Administration that would actually execute that. And so it's not, that organization is not under her, so she doesn't have the authority. So that's where some of the challenges lay, is sort of one department speaking to another department can influence, but they don't have the authority. So we're not sure exactly how much.
You're just trying. We're just
Yeah, yeah, we're
like, and that's
trying.
all that can happen, right? You know, that's all you can do.
Yeah, yeah, and so we recognize this is not an overnight effort. This is a swing for the fences thing. This is not an incremental thing. This is a game changer thing that we're trying to do. And so the big things take time,
Yep.
and we know that. But just to be able to plant the seed of this idea is really really valuable. I think it's a great step for us.
What is the next step? Like, the having submitted that stuff to the secretary, like, is there another meeting coming up, or like what, or everybody's just hanging out waiting to get notification?
Yeah, I think we're going to hear feedback. I believe this month. This is that this month we should hear feedback on that. And I think there was about five subcommittees, and they each presented 3 to 5 recommendations. And so
Yep.
not every recommendation will be worked. We know that, and some may be worked officially, and some may be unofficially, and so we know that we don't think that everyone will get worked immediately. So we're hoping to have one or two actively worked in the next year. That would be progress for us.
For sure. It's
Yeah.
almost like a grant application, right? You're just like sitting there waiting. You
Hmm.
know, you
Hmm.
can. So, um, are you involved in, I know that you're on that council or committee, and so what else, like, are you involved in any other civic associations, or like what's a what's a typical week like for you when you're not traveling?
It's busy. It's busy because now I think sometimes I have a bigger appetite than my stomach, and so, but I see challenges and I see problems and I want to go solve them, and
Mhm.
so I have founded 3 companies now, and so sort of running those companies is challenging, particularly since COVID hit
Yeah.
us. Pre-COVID it was fairly simple. We were adding 1 or 2 employees a year, and that was pretty manageable growth. But then we had COVID. We had to shrink tremendously. We went from about 21 employees down to 8, I think was the lowest. Now we're up to about 30, so we're back, and so it's very busy running 3 companies, but I've got some great team members that really really help me out there, and so just trying to get the right pieces in place, because I do want most of my time to be dedicated to the vision of accessible travel for the global industry, and how do we advance it in a significant way? How do we move more from the bite-sized little chunks? How do we make a big step change? And that's what I'm really passionate about. So I just try to get my time freed up to work on that, but that's kind of tough with 3 companies.
Accessible world domination. And I say autism world domination. Like, that's my goal, is, to
Yeah.
take our training program and produce it in other countries, and of course in their languages with culturally relevant imagery. So, and we're actually working with an organization in Africa right now to or South Africa to do one of our modules, our general module in Swahili. So
Wow.
yeah, that's kind of exciting. That's for like a sister autism organization. So
Hmm.
yeah, that's groovy. And I can't wait to, announce that. But yeah, I'm with you. Like what can we do to support our people and continue to do that and do it better? So where did you come from? Because you're very passionate, successful, driven, motivated. Um, were you always like that?
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much. I mean, just yeah, going back to high school, was real successful in high school, and you know, winning awards in high school and college. And so yeah, it was just have been driven. And then it was interesting, going graduating college and going to work for a huge corporation where you're sort of you follow the processes are very well defined. And I didn't realize it at the time, but that was not a good fit for me
Mm.
working in a huge corporation. I'm an outside the box thinker, I'm a problem solver. And so really got passionate once starting my business, and then can identify problems and identify solutions. And so yeah, that's been I finally found the right fit as an entrepreneur to be able to make a difference, and that's been exciting for me.
What were your parents like? What did they do?
They so my father, my mom did a wonderful job of raising my brother and I. My father did a variety of things, but when I was in high school, his sister was murdered, and it was a real traumatic experience for the family. She had actually introduced my parents when they were in high school, and she was my mom's best friend in high school, and that was really difficult. He ended up a few years later founding a nonprofit that does restorative justice. Basically, goes into prisons and helps prisoners understand, helps the inmates understand the impact of the crimes that they've commit, so that they can rejoin society as in a better place and as productive members of society. And so he's had tremendous success with that over the last 25 years. It's been over 25 years he's done that. And so yeah, it's in a way, what he does is sort of social entrepreneurship, even though it's technically a nonprofit that runs off donations. But I'm sort
Right.
of doing something similar.
I like that social entrepreneurship because I feel like I'm right in there.
Mhm.
So, do you live near them? Do you get to see them often?
I do. So I live in New Braunfels, Texas, which is in between Austin and San Antonio, and they live in Houston, which is less than 3 hours away.
Nice.
Yeah,
That's a beautiful thing.
yeah.
And so what else do you, I know you said you enjoy art and things like that. Now, have you been to the Myrtle Beach area, the Grand Strand yet?
I have not.
Okay.
Do I
Might
need
have
to
to
come?
try that. Oh, probably. Yeah, you need to come and play. The beach is lovely.
Hmm.
Um, where's your next trip or your next I guess what are you going to do? What are your goals for 2024?
Yeah, a lot of my travel. So getting the first company off the ground was a lot of research for destinations. Now I don't really do that anymore. Occasionally, we'll send employees, some of my employees, to do that. Now a lot of my travel is to conferences,
Hmm.
basically, and some of them are speaking engagements or other types of conferences. So my next, and that keeps my calendar very full.
Hmm.
So I think in the last I can rattle off a few places I've been on in the last couple years is Rwanda. I've been to Riyadh, Saudi Arabia twice, been to Las Vegas twice, Dallas twice, Toronto. Um, let's see, I've been to Florida a few times, been to uh, where Poland, I had a conference. I've been to the Philippines, so a lot of different places to go to these conferences. So my next one is actually to Seattle to speak at the Pacific Northwest cruise event at the
Oh,
end of this
nice.
month. At the end of this month, so it's organized by the by CLIA, the Cruise Line Association, and so to speak on accessibility there. And so that's my next one.
Awesome. You'll be hanging out, I guess, with Ron Pettit from
I
Royal.
hope he will be there. Ron is a dear friend and truly one of the experts in accessible travel, and hope he will be there.
Oh, right. I'm sure he will be. He doesn't, and then of course we have to see what the drink of the day is, and that's all good. I'm the guy for that. I'm supposed to be seeing him tomorrow, so
Wonderful.
it's been a hot minute, so it'll be
Yeah.
good to talk to him.
Mhm.
So, is there anything that you want people to know, or I guess, look, wait. th- My next question is what is it being in a wheelchair that is really like your just makes you frustrated, like just
Yeah. I mean, the biggest frustrations for me are not the physical barriers. It's when a policy or process prevents accessibility, because a policy or process is created, basically. And so it's those are frustrating, and the barriers are not intentional, but it's somebody that doesn't really understand disabled travelers' needs, and so they create a process or policy that makes it just either a barrier or a hurdle. It's something
can
that's
you
annoying.
share an example?
Sure. A couple of examples. So one is in the cruise lines. They have tenders, which are small boats to bring people ashore in certain ports. And the way that a lot of the cruise lines describe that, you must be able to take a step onto the tender to use it. And that, yeah, and so that, and I've been all over the place and been through all sorts of, and so like that one little step is not a huge physical accessibility barrier. And so it's that process and permission that creates the barrier. I mean, I've been on a bunch of the Vaporetto boats in Venice. Very easy to get on and off, and kind of learned how to do that. And so it should be the same system for the tenders. And so it is possible for a lot of times. What's interesting is they say that, but then if you actually show up, they're a lot more accommodating and willing to help, assuming the seas are flat. And I realize in really choppy water that would be unsafe. But so that's one example, is just they need to do a better job of messaging it. And if we can put a man on the moon, we can get a wheelchair onto a tender. You know, just the physics of it is doable. So that's one example. Um, Another example is with rental cars. So
Mm.
with rental cars, I use hand controls. And what happens with a lot of the rental car companies is you go online, you're shopping around, you're gonna book your rental car. Okay, ready to book. Okay, do you want a child seat? No. Do you want a ski rack? No. Do you want GPS? No. Do oh, you want hand controls? Here, you got to call this number. Then so you have to search the internet. Sometimes they don't even give the number, and so you have to search their page to find. So everybody else gets to make their reservation online. Well, now I have to call and wait on hold, and it's this much more tedious process, when all I really want to do is say, I want the only questions they really ask, do you want left side or right side hand controls? Do you want a spinner knob? Those are just the two questions they ask. And so they haven't created a process so that I can easily reserve those. This is maybe some of the rental car companies can, but this is my most recent experience. And so it's this little process hurdle. It's not an entire barrier,
Right,
but yeah, it's just an annoyance that, like, I have to spend more time reserving a car than somebody else does.
right, and that's a hassle.
Yeah,
And, and it's all database driven. I guess a lot of it, like with those big companies too, it's just it would be easy to add, but like kind of like the government, the wheels move slow. And they're like, oh, that's a great idea. And then we'll send it up the food chain, it'll go left, it'll
Mhm.
go right, and have all those
Yeah.
and we
And,
just
and,
hope.
and this is one of the things that we're trying to educate the businesses on is, hey, when you have enough of these little hurdles, they add up and people stay at home.
Yeah.
And so you lose out on the business. And so this is what I try to
Our
teach.
messaging the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
We,
it's
we try
not
to, yeah,
hard.
I try to educate them. Okay, look, a lot of people view accessibility as legal compliance or customer service, when actually it's a revenue generator.
Mhm.
If you do it right, you're going to save money because you're not customizing every individual for every individual. You actually address it in advance, and so you don't have to do this tedious customization. And you get to attract new customers, and you
Yep.
get to attract new customers. You get to retain your existing customers as they age, and so there's the, that's what I try to get through is accessibility is a moneymaker.
Mhm.
It's this is not about a feel good thing or legal compliance. It's a moneymaker if you do it right.
And that's the thing, like, I guess people that we're working with now are like early adopters,
Mhm,
and because now it's
mhm,
the space is just giant with diversity, equity, and inclusion. And like I'm on the council for the Myrtle Beach Area Chamber of Commerce, and it's been like, but I just come from my little tiny autism corner, right? Intellectual disabilities, I'm over here, and it's amazing um the number or I guess the depth of need for education for DEI. And when I kind of talk about that and people getting involved, autism is the low hanging fruit, right? You don't have to, you just turn up the lights and turn the music down and lead with love and be kind generally. We
mhm.
do have tips and tricks in our modules, but it is to be an economic um, impact. We want to do
Yeah,
that. So
yeah,
kudos to you.
yeah. The challenge that we're seeing now, I'm trying to get this message across that hey, you make money, but the key thing you make money if it's done correctly.
Yep.
And so what happens sometimes, and I can tell you, I've seen this in destinations, I've seen it in the cruise lines, I've seen it with travel agencies. They start and they do a best effort sort of half baked solution that's not a full solution, and they don't see the proper return on investment, and so they're like, well, accessible travel is not really profitable. And so in a lot of ways, a lot of these organizations, you kind of get one shot
Yep.
of them like focusing on accessibility. And if they go down the path of doing some half-baked solution, it almost becomes a barrier to accessibility progress because they don't see the return on investment. And so that's something that we're trying to push to say you've got to do the comprehensive solution. Accessibility is not a checkbox. If you think, oh, we're going to have some internal people that are not really accessibility experts, but they're going to do something and we're going to call it progress, we're going to feel good about it, you don't gain the disabled traveler's trust, you don't get their check,
It's true.
and so you stop working on accessibility. The manager starts the or executive starts to say, hey, no, we tried accessibility, it didn't work, we're not spending any more money on that.
Right.
And so that's something we're trying to be cognizant of.
Right. And that's part of the consulting side, right, of your business. And you're trying to, so that is, yeah, it's a big hurdle to overcome where people
Mhm.
think done it, been there, moved on.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right about doing it right. And it's interesting because some of our families will come, because this is an autism friendly travel destination,
Mhm.
and I'll get complaints from them about certain resorts and hotels not allowing them to do things. When in actuality they went to a resort or a hotel that was not part of the network. And so I was like, I can go talk to them, but you know, you
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, and so I hope people are following your direction. Okay, so just so we're in closing now, is there anything you want people to know about you or your companies or your mission and vision and global
Yeah,
domination?
I mean, just where we are now, we had a lot of success with the first two companies of making travel easier for people with disabilities. What the third company is really focused on is making travel inclusive and equitable for people with disabilities. So we want the people with disabilities to be included in the mainstream travel industry and to have the same, be able to book their trips with the same ease that a able-bodied person can. And so really focused on that. What's exciting is there's a lot of interest in accessibility right now. In many ways, it's following the coattails of DEI and sustainability. There's a lot of parallels in the way that it can be addressed, although there are some significant differences. Accessibility is not the same as DEI. But what we're seeing, there are accessibility committees and subcommittees and advisory boards that I'm a part of, and in various organizations, whether it's cruise or airport or destinations or government, or the other private sector organizations, and so there's an interest in it. The challenge is that a lot of these organizations or businesses or destinations don't have internal accessibility experts.
Mhm.
And so it's difficult for somebody who's not an accessibility expert to pick up a set of guidelines or laws or anything and implement accessibility. And so that's the challenge is, okay, how do we, the desire for accessibility is there, the execution is the challenge.
Mhm.
And so we're doing a variety of things to solve that. We're developing software to do remote accessibility assessments, training for accessibility, certification for accessibility, so that these organizations can invest their money properly and realize the return on investment, where it's a profitable expenditure. It's not a cost sink. And so we're really exciting. I think there's really a lot of improvement that's going to happen in the coming years.
Well, of course. So you're traveling because you're going to go up to Seattle, and
Mhm.
then you're running around like crazy. Do you have any personal travel plans?
So I believe I'm going to speak at a cruise week in Genoa, Italy,
Woo.
in March over spring break. I don't have the official approval for that, but that was mentioned. And if that happens, then I'll get to spend spring break in Italy. So do one of these. The new term is bleisure. It's a business
Yeah,
leisure
yeah,
trip,
yeah.
and
Right.
so
That's what we all do. We can work anywhere. It's perfect.
exactly. So to be able to go there, attend the conference for a day or two, and I just love Italy, and so go. I've never been to Lake Como, so
Mm.
that's somewhere I want to go. But also Portofino and Santa Margherita, I've been to very briefly, and just beautiful Italian coastal towns, and so just enjoy some pasta and Italy over spring break. That's my next goal.
So how do you keep your svelte figure in a wheelchair?
I ride my hand cycle.
Okay.
Yeah, so I have a hand cycle, and so it has manual cranks like that work like this in front of me. My legs are out in front. There's one wheel in the front that the cranks pull the front wheel through a chain, and there's two wheels in the back, very low to the ground. But it's excellent exercise, and I live now in what's called the Texas Hill Country. So there are some hills that make for some great riding experiences. So I try to do that a few times a week, and that it's a great mental and physical activity just to sort of get out in nature and ride a little bit.
Get out, get out. And
Mhm.
what is your favorite food?
Well, favorite food. Now that I've been talking about Italy so much,
Yeah, you
I'll have
said
to.
pasta, and I was like, oh, it's almost
Yeah,
lunchtime.
I,
Thank
I
God.
know, I know. I'll have to go with the pasta. So in the U.S., we only, if you go to an Italian restaurant, there's about seven pasta dishes that you might run into, and it's the same seven just about every pasta restaurant you go to. But over there, you go to a restaurant, and there's 40 pasta dishes, and so there was one called Pecorino e Pepe, and it's pecorino, goat cheese, and pepper on pasta, and it's just the simplest thing, and it's everywhere, and it's cheap, and it's just this very authentic natural thing. And so I had that at many a restaurant there, so I'm going to find that when I go
All
back.
right, you're digging in. You're doing it. Well, Mr. John Sage, I think you're incredible, and you are making a large impact every day you wake up and open your eyes. So thank you for all that you do and all the people that you serve, including all your employees and all of your companies. And I wish you the greatest success today and every day. And if
Thank you,
there's anything
Becky.
I can do to help you, let me know.
Certainly, certainly, we will figure out a way to work together.